She wept to a servant about her fate. He removed his ring and broke her heart again. 1914. The September rain fell softly on the cobblestones of Beacon Hill, Boston, turning the gaslit streets into mirrors of amber light. Inside the Ashford mansion, Catherine Ashford stood before her bedroom window, watching drops trace paths down the glass like the tears she refused to shed in front of her family. Her engagement to Senator Hartwell's son would be announced at tomorrow's garden party, and everyone in Boston society believed she should be the happiest woman in Massachusetts. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her breath creating small clouds of condensation. Below, in the servants' entrance, she could see movement. The kitchen staff finishing their evening duties, the stable hand leading horses to the carriage house. Somewhere down there, among the people her parents barely noticed, was the only person who knew the truth about why her hands trembled when she thought of tomorrow. Before we continue with Catherine's story, I'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Stories like this one connect us across time and distance, and I'd love to know where this tale of forbidden love and heartbreak has found you today. The knock on her door was soft, respectful. "Miss Catherine, your mother says you're to come down for dinner in 20 minutes. "Come in, Mary," Catherine said, turning from the window. Mary O'Brien entered carrying a pressed dinner gown, her movements efficient despite the heaviness in her eyes. She'd been with the Ashford family for 3 years, starting as a scullery maid before becoming Catherine's lady's maid. At 23, she was only 2 years older than Catherine, but the difference in their stations made them inhabit entirely different worlds, or it should have. "You've been crying," Mary said quietly, setting the gown on the bed. "I haven't." Catherine's voice was steady, but Mary knew her better than that. "Your eyes are red, miss. Shall I fetch some cold compresses?" Catherine shook her head, moving away from the window. "Mary, do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you'd been born into a different family, different circumstances?" Mary's hands stilled on the gown's buttons. "Every day, miss. But wondering doesn't change what is." "But what if—" Catherine stopped herself, biting her lip. The words she wanted to say were dangerous, the kind that could ruin everything. But Mary had become more than a servant over these years. She'd become the only real friend Catherine had, the only person who listened without judgment or expectation. "What if what, miss? What if I told you I can't marry Richard Hartwell? That I'd rather run away, live in poverty, work in a factory, anything but spend my life with a man I don't love?" Mary carefully hung the gown and turned to face Catherine fully. Her expression was sympathetic but realistic. "I'd say you don't know what poverty means, Miss Catherine. Factory work isn't romantic. It's 12 hours standing until your feet bleed, breathing cotton dust until you cough blood, earning barely enough to keep a roof over your head. Love might warm your heart, but it won't fill your stomach or pay the doctor when you fall ill." "But you'd choose love, wouldn't you, if you had the chance?" A shadow passed over Mary's face. "I did choose love once, or thought I did. It didn't end well." Catherine sat on the edge of her bed, curiosity overcoming propriety. "Tell me." Mary hesitated, then sat in the chair by the vanity, something she'd never have dared with any other employer. "His name was Patrick. We were to be married 4 years ago, back in Ireland. I was 17, foolish, so sure that love was enough. He was a tenant farmer's son, same as my da. We had nothing but plans and promises." "What happened?" "The landlord's son took a fancy to me, started making suggestions. Patrick tried to defend me, confronted him. The young master had him accused of theft, planted evidence, the whole thing. Patrick was arrested, and I had to watch them drag him away. My family lost our cottage because of it. Patrick was sentenced to 5 years hard labor. By the time I'd saved enough money to come to America, I'd learned that he'd died in prison. Pneumonia. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes, for Mary's loss, for the unfairness of it all. "Oh, Mary, I'm so sorry. The point is, Miss Catherine, that loving someone doesn't protect you. Sometimes it makes you more vulnerable. Patrick and I would have had a simple life, maybe a happy one, but we'd have been one bad harvest away from starvation, one landlord's whim away from disaster. Your parents might be controlling, but they're giving you security, a future. That's not nothing. But what about happiness?" Mary stood, smoothing her apron. "That's a luxury question, miss. Most of us don't get to ask it." Matma. The dinner that evening was an ordeal Catherine had learned to endure through years of practice. Her father, Theodore Ashford, sat at the head of the table discussing railway investments with her older brother James. Her mother, Eleanor, presided over the meal with the precision of a general commanding troops, ensuring every course was perfectly timed, every conversation properly directed. "Richard will arrive tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Eleanor announced, cutting her roasted duck with surgical precision. "He'll want to walk with you in the garden before the announcement. Catherine, you'll wear the ivory dress with the lace overlay. It photographs well." "Yes, Mother," Catherine replied automatically. "Senator Hartwell tells me they're considering Richard for the state legislature next year," her father added. "Fine young man, excellent connections. This alliance will be very beneficial for both families." Alliance, not marriage, alliance, as if Catherine were a piece in a chess game rather than a person with hopes and dreams. "Catherine, dear, you look pale," Eleanor observed with the clinical detachment of someone noting a vase slightly askew. "Are you feeling unwell?" "Just tired, Mother." "Well, rest up tonight. Tomorrow is an important day. The Cabots will be there, the Lowells, the Chandlers, everyone who matters in Boston society. We can't have you looking sickly." After dinner, Catherine escaped to the library, her favorite refuge in the sprawling mansion. The room smelled of leather and old paper, and the gas lamps cast warm pools of light across Persian rugs and mahogany shelves. She selected a volume of poetry, anything to distract from tomorrow's inevitability, and settled into the window seat. She'd been reading for perhaps 10 minutes when she heard voices outside. Male voices, low and urgent. Curious, she moved closer to the window, which overlooked the side garden and the path leading to the servants' quarters. 2 men stood in the shadows beyond the garden lights. One was clearly a servant, though Catherine couldn't see his face. The other was better dressed, his coat and hat suggesting middle-class respectability. Their conversation was heated, but too quiet for Catherine to make out words. Then the well-dressed man pulled something from his pocket, an envelope, thick with what looked like money. The servant took it, nodded, and both men disappeared into the darkness. Catherine's heart raced. What had she just witnessed? Was someone in their household taking bribes? Stealing? She thought immediately of Mary, then dismissed it. Mary was honest to a fault, and besides, that hadn't been a woman's silhouette. The library door opened, and Catherine spun around, guilty as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. It was James, her brother. At 25, he was everything their parents wanted. Harvard-educated, already working in their father's business, engaged to the daughter of a prominent banking family. "Hiding again, Kitty?" he asked, using her childhood nickname. "Reading," she corrected, showing him the book. James poured himself a brandy from the crystal decanter and settled into one of the leather chairs. Unlike their parents, he at least treated Catherine like a person rather than a chess piece. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "you don't have to go through with it." Catherine stared at him. "What?" "The engagement, marriage to Richard. You don't have to do it." Mother and father would be disappointed, certainly. Perhaps they'd stop speaking to you for a while. But eventually they'd accept it. They love you in their way. You think they'd just let me refuse, without consequences?" James swirled his brandy. "There would be consequences. Social ones, certainly. They might cut your allowance, restrict your activities. But you're intelligent, Catherine. You could find work, teaching perhaps, or as a governess. It wouldn't be the life you're accustomed to, but it would be your own. Why are you saying this now? Because I saw your face at dinner. The same trapped expression I see in my mirror some mornings. He smiled sadly. I went along with it, with Evelyn, with father's business, with all of it. Sometimes I wonder what my life might have looked like if I'd had the courage to choose differently. Catherine sat down across from him, her book forgotten. Are you unhappy? I'm content, which is not the same thing, is it? He took a long drink. Evelyn is pleasant enough. We get along well. We'll have children, host parties, join the right clubs. It's a perfectly acceptable life, just not necessarily the life I might have chosen for myself. What would you have chosen? James laughed, but there was melancholy in it. That's the question, isn't it? I've spent so long doing what was expected that I'm not sure I know anymore, but you still have time, Kitty. You're only 21. You could still choose differently. Day before Catherine could respond, they heard footsteps in the hall. James stood quickly, setting down his glass. Think about what I said, and if you do decide to go through with it tomorrow, at least know that you had a choice. He left her alone with her thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that her usually compliant brother had just offered her a glimpse of his own quiet desperation. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Mary's story, about James's admission, about the mysterious transaction she'd witnessed in the garden. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and wrapped a shawl around her nightgown, deciding to go downstairs for warm milk. Something Mary had taught her helped with insomnia. The house was dark, except for the occasional gas lamp left burning for safety. Catherine moved quietly through the halls, not wanting to wake anyone. As she passed her father's study, she noticed light seeping under the door and heard voices. She shouldn't eavesdrop. She knew it was wrong, but something made her stop, press closer to the door. "Can't keep paying him," her father was saying, voice tight with stress. "The man's a blackmailer, pure and simple. Then what do you suggest?" That was her Uncle Robert, her father's younger brother. "If the information gets out, it ruins everything. The business, the family name, Catherine's engagement. I know what it ruins." Her father's fist hit the desk. "I've made mistakes, Robert. God knows I've made mistakes, but I won't let them destroy what I've built, what I'm leaving for my children. The servant who knows has been dealt with. I've arranged for his transfer to our New York property. He leaves day after tomorrow." Catherine's heart hammered. Was this related to what she'd seen in the garden? What secret was so terrible that her father was paying someone off and moving servants around? "And the documentation?" Robert asked. "Hidden. The lawyer has instructions to destroy everything if anything happens to me. It's the best I can do. Theodore, you're playing a dangerous game. I'm protecting my family. Everything I've done for them." Catherine moved away from the door as quietly as she could, her need for warm milk forgotten. Instead, she found herself at Mary's door in the servants' quarters, knocking softly. Mary answered in her nightgown, alarmed. "Miss Catherine, what's wrong?" "I need to talk to someone," Catherine whispered. "May I come in?" It was unprecedented, a young lady of the house entering a servant's room in the middle of the night. But Mary stepped aside, closing the door behind them. The room was tiny, barely larger than Catherine's closet, with a narrow bed, a small table, and a trunk for Mary's possessions. But it was neat, with wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill, and a photograph of a couple Catherine assumed were Mary's parents. "What's happened?" Mary asked, guiding Catherine to sit on the bed. Catherine told her everything. The conversation with James, the exchange in the garden, overhearing her father's study. As she spoke, tears started falling, all the pressure and confusion and fear finally breaking through her carefully maintained composure. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I don't know who to trust. I don't even know if my own family is who I think they are. And tomorrow I'm supposed to smile and accept Richard's ring and pretend everything is perfect. And I feel like I'm drowning, Mary. I feel like I'm disappearing." Mary wrapped her arms around Catherine, letting her cry against her shoulder. "Shh, miss, it's all right. You're not alone." They stayed like that for a long moment, Catherine clinging to the one person who felt real in a world of masks and pretense. When Catherine finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, she found Mary looking at her with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. "What do I do?" Catherine asked. "About tomorrow? About the engagement? About all of it?" Mary was quiet for a moment, thinking. "My ma used to say that when you don't know which path to take, you look for the one where you can live with yourself after. Not the easiest path, not the hardest. The one where you can still look yourself in the mirror. And if I don't know which one that is, then you buy yourself time to figure it out. Tell your parents you need to think. Ask Richard for a longer engagement. Make up an illness if you have to. But don't make a lifelong decision when you're this confused and scared." It was practical advice, the kind that came from someone who'd learned to navigate difficult situations. Catherine nodded, feeling slightly steadier. "Thank you, Mary, for everything, for listening, for being honest with me." "Of course, miss. That's what friends do." Friends. The word hung in the air between them, acknowledging what they both knew, that their relationship had long since moved beyond mistress and servant into something more complicated, more genuine. Catherine stood to leave, then impulsively took Mary's hand. "If I do refuse Richard tomorrow, if I do choose differently, would you come with me? If I have to leave this house, I mean, would you—" She trailed off, not even sure what she was asking. Mary squeezed her hand gently. "Let's take it one day at a time, miss. Make it through tomorrow first, then we'll see what comes next." The next morning arrived with cruel sunshine, the kind of perfect September day that seemed designed to mock Catherine's turmoil. She dressed in the ivory gown as instructed, sat still while Mary arranged her hair, and descended the stairs to face her fate with as much grace as she could muster. The garden party was already in full swing when Richard Hartwell arrived. He was handsome in a conventional way, tall, well-groomed, with the easy confidence that came from never having to worry about money or status. He greeted Catherine's parents warmly, exchanged jokes with her father about politics, complimented her mother's garden. "Catherine," he said when he finally turned to her, taking her gloved hand, "you look lovely." "Thank you, Richard. Shall we walk? I'd like a few moments alone before the announcement." "Neat." They strolled through the garden paths, while curious eyes tracked them from the lawn. Richard made small talk about his father's latest legislative agenda, about the house they'd live in after the wedding, about the trip to Europe they'd take for their honeymoon. Catherine barely heard him. She kept thinking of Mary's words, the path where you can live with yourself after. They reached the rose garden, secluded from the party by tall hedges. Richard stopped, turning to face her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I suppose this is when I'm meant to make some grand romantic gesture," he said. "But we both know this isn't about romance, Catherine. It's about family, duty, the joining of two important names." His honesty surprised her. "You don't love me. I respect you. I think we'll get along well enough. Isn't that better than some passionate entanglement that burns out in a few years?" He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "My grandmother's ring. Mother insisted." Catherine looked at the box but didn't reach for it. "Richard, Miss Catherine!" The shout came from the main house, urgent and alarmed. It was Mary, running across the lawn with complete disregard for propriety, her cap askew and her face pale. Catherine's heart leaped. "Mary, what's wrong?" Mary reached them breathless. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but Miss Catherine, you need to come quickly. It's your father. He's collapsed." Everything happened very fast after that. The party dissolved in chaos as doctors were summoned, guests sent home, the household thrown into crisis. Theodore Ashford had suffered what the doctor called an apoplectic fit, what would later be known as a stroke. He was alive but unconscious, and the prognosis was uncertain. Eleanor Ashford transformed into a woman Catherine barely recognized, focused, commanding, dealing with the crisis with military efficiency. James took charge of business matters, Robert handled communications with their father's associates, and Catherine found herself strangely peripheral to it all, relegated to sitting vigil in her father's room while chaos swirled around her. Richard departed with appropriate condolences. The engagement announcement postponed indefinitely. The velvet ring box remained unopened in Catherine's pocket, a question that would wait for another day. It was evening before Catherine finally escaped to her own room, exhausted and emotionally drained. Mary brought her dinner on a tray, then sat with her while she picked at the food. "I'm sorry about your father, miss," Mary said quietly. "I know you have complicated feelings about him, but I hope he recovers." "So do I." Catherine set down her fork. "Mary, I keep thinking about what you said last night, about finding the path where I can live with myself. I think today decided it for me. I can't marry Richard. I can't spend my life in a loveless alliance, no matter how practical or sensible. Life's too short, too precious. My father nearly died today, and all I could think was that if I'd accepted that ring this morning, I'd be trapped forever in a life I don't want. What will you tell your family? The truth, that I'm grateful for everything they've given me, but I need to make my own choices, even if those choices lead somewhere difficult." Mary studied her face for a long moment. "You mean it, don't you? You're really going to do this?" "I am. And I meant what I said last night. If they disown me, if I have to leave, will you come with me? I know it's asking a lot. I know you'd be leaving secure employment. But I can't do this alone, Mary. You're the only person in this house who sees me as a person rather than a chess piece." Something shifted in Mary's expression, hope mixed with fear. "Miss Catherine, there's something you should know about your father, about what you overheard last night." "You know about it?" "The servant they're sending to New York. It's my cousin Danny. He came to see me yesterday to say goodbye. That's who you saw in the garden, taking money. But miss, it's not what you think. Your father isn't paying him off because of something criminal. He's paying him off because—" She stopped, struggling with whether to continue. "Tell me," Catherine urged. "Danny works in your father's study, empties the wastepaper baskets, maintains the fireplace. A few months ago he found some burned papers that weren't completely destroyed. Letters. Love letters." Catherine felt her stomach drop. "My father was having an affair?" "No, miss. The letters were to your father. From a man. From 30 years ago, before he married your mother." The room seemed to tilt. Catherine gripped the edge of her chair, trying to process this information. "My father, he loved a man." "According to the letters, yes. A clerk who worked for his father's business. The relationship ended when your grandfather found out and threatened to disown Theodore if he didn't marry appropriately and produce heirs. The clerk was dismissed, and your father never saw him again. But he kept the letters, hidden in his study for decades. Danny found them by accident and foolishly mentioned it to someone who decided to use the information for profit." Catherine's mind reeled. Her rigid, controlling father, the man who demanded propriety and appearances above all else, had once loved someone forbidden, had sacrificed that love for family duty and social expectations, just as he was now expecting Catherine to do. "Oh, God," she whispered, "he's been living a lie his entire life, and now he wants me to do the same." "I think he believes he's protecting you," Mary said carefully. "In his mind, he gave up his happiness and built a successful life. He probably thinks he's offering you the same path, sacrifice for security. But it destroyed him. Can't he see that? The man he is now, so cold, so controlled. That's what happens when you deny who you really are for long enough. Catherine stood up, pacing her room. Everything suddenly made sense. Her father's obsession with propriety, his need to maintain appearances, his panic when the letters were discovered. He'd spent 30 years building a fortress of respectability to hide a truth that could ruin him. Mary, what happened to the man my father loved? The clerk? Danny didn't know. The letters just said he left Boston. There was no forwarding address. An idea began to form in Catherine's mind, dangerous and impulsive. Can Danny get me those letters before he leaves for New York? Miss Catherine, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, if my father wakes up and I can show him I know the truth, not to hurt him, but to help him understand, he might finally see that forcing me into Richard's life would be making the same mistake he made. That some things matter more than money and status. That's a risk, miss. He might react badly, might see it as blackmail. I'm not going to blackmail him. I'm going to tell him I understand, that I love him anyway, that we all deserve to make our own choices about love, even if society disapproves. Catherine sat back down, taking Mary's hands in hers. And I'm going to tell him that I choose you. Mary's eyes widened. Miss Catherine, I know it's not what people do. I know it's not how things work, but I don't care anymore, Mary. I've spent 21 years being what everyone else wanted me to be. These past few hours, thinking my father might die, thinking about spending my life with Richard, it clarified everything. You're the person I want to talk to at the end of the day. You're who makes me laugh, who challenges me, who sees all of me and still chooses to stay. That's love, isn't it? Regardless of how society labels it. Tears were running down Mary's face now. You don't know what you're saying. The scandal, the consequences. Would be worth it to live honestly. Do not become my father, trapped in a life that slowly suffocates every real feeling. Say you'll come with me, Mary. Say we'll figure this out together. Mary pulled her hands back, standing up and moving to the window. For a long moment she was silent, and Catherine feared she'd pushed too far, asked too much. Then Mary turned around, her expression resolving into something firm and determined. All right, she said. If you're serious about this, truly serious, then yes, I'll come with you. We'll face whatever comes together, but we do it right, Miss Catherine. No running away in the night, no scandals if we can help it. We tell your family with dignity, we make a plan, we do this in a way we can both be proud of. Catherine crossed the room and hugged her tightly, feeling like she could breathe fully for the first time in months. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for believing in me. I've believed in you since the day you asked me about my life, instead of just ordering me around, Mary replied. Now let me get those letters from Danny, and let's see if we can reach your father's heart when he wakes up. Theodore Ashford regained consciousness 3 days later. The stroke had left him weakened, his left side partially paralyzed, his speech slightly slurred. But his mind was intact. And as soon as he could speak clearly enough, he demanded to know the status of Catherine's engagement. Postponed, Theodore, Eleanor said, sitting by his bedside with rigid composure. Obviously, under the circumstances. No. Her father's voice was rough but insistent. Can't postpone. Catherine needs to be settled, secure. Call Hartwell, arrange it. Father, Catherine said from the doorway. I need to talk to you. Alone. Eleanor looked scandalized. Catherine, your father needs rest, not... It's all right, Theodore said, waving his good hand weakly. Leave us. Eleanor departed with obvious reluctance, and Catherine closed the door behind her. She moved to sit beside her father's bed, holding the packet of letters Danny had retrieved for her. What's that? Her father asked, eyeing the bundle with sudden tension. Letters, Catherine said gently. Love letters from 30 years ago. I know, Father. I know about Michael. The color drained from Theodore's already pale face. How did you... It doesn't matter. What matters is that I understand now. I understand why you're so desperate to marry me off to Richard, why you value security and propriety over everything else. You gave up your happiness to maintain this family's status. You sacrificed your love because grandfather demanded it. Catherine, those letters need to be destroyed. If anyone finds out... I'm not going to tell anyone, Father. Your secret is safe, but I need you to understand something. I won't make the same sacrifice you did. I won't marry Richard. I won't spend my life in a loveless marriage just to maintain appearances. Her father tried to sit up, failed, fell back against his pillows. You don't understand. You're young, naive. Love doesn't last, Catherine. But security, reputation, those endure. I built this life to protect you, to give you everything I never had. You had love, Catherine said quietly. You had someone who saw you, really saw you, and loved you for who you were. And you gave it up. For what? For money? For mother's family connections? Are you happy, Father? Was it worth it? Tears gathered in Theodore's eyes. Happiness is a luxury, Catherine. Survival is what matters. No. Catherine leaned forward, taking her father's good hand in both of hers. Living matters. Actually living, not just surviving. You've been half alive for 30 years, Father, hiding who you really are, pretending to be someone you're not. And it's made you hard and cold, and so afraid that you can barely breathe. I don't want that life. I'd rather be poor and honest than rich and hollow. What are you saying, that you're in love with someone else, some unsuitable young man? Catherine took a deep breath. Not a man, Father. Mary. The silence that followed was absolute. Theodore stared at her, incomprehension giving way to shock, then to something that might have been recognition. Mary O'Brien, Catherine continued, my lady's maid, the person who's been my truest friend for 3 years, the one who makes me laugh, who challenges me to think, who knows all of me and still chooses to stay. I love her, Father, the way you loved Michael, and I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to spend my life pretending. Catherine, her father's voice cracked. You can't. Society will destroy you. Your mother, James, everyone in our circle, they'll disown you. You'll have nothing. I'll have myself. I'll have the truth. I'll have Mary. That's not nothing. Her father closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. I wanted better for you. You wanted safety for me, but Father, safe isn't the same as good, and I'd rather risk everything for a chance at real happiness than guarantee myself a lifetime of quiet desperation. For a long moment Theodore said nothing. Then in a voice so quiet Catherine barely heard it, Michael worked as a clerk in Pittsburgh. Last I heard, 20 years ago, he had a bookshop there. I don't know if he's still alive, still there. I never looked, never dared. Catherine's heart clenched. Father. Go, he said, opening his eyes. If you're going to do this, go now, before your mother convinces me to stop you. I'll tell her you're staying with your Aunt Helen in Philadelphia for a few months to recover from the shock of my illness. That will buy you time. Take Mary. Take whatever money you've saved. And Catherine... His voice broke. Be braver than I was. Catherine leaned down and kissed her father's forehead. I love you, Father. I hope someday you'll forgive yourself enough to find your own happiness again. Too late for me, but not for you. Go. Return. 3 weeks later, Catherine and Mary stood on a train platform in Boston, bags at their feet, tickets to Pittsburgh in their hands. Catherine had written letters to James and her mother, trying to explain in a way they might eventually understand. She'd given Richard his grandmother's ring back, with an apology and an honesty that had surprised them both into parting as friends. She'd packed only what she could carry and withdrawn all her savings from her personal account, enough to support them for several months if they were careful. "Last chance to change your mind," Mary said, though her hand was tight in Catherine's. "Not a chance," Catherine replied, feeling more alive than she had in years, despite the fear and uncertainty. "We're going to Pittsburgh. We're going to find a place to live, find work, build a life. And maybe, just maybe, we'll help my father find an old friend who might still remember him." The train whistle blew. They picked up their bags and climbed aboard, choosing seats by the window so they could watch Boston recede into the distance. As the city disappeared behind them, Catherine felt the weight of expectations falling away, replaced by something lighter and infinitely more precious: possibility. "What do you think will happen?" Mary asked as the train gathered speed. "Your father, will he actually try to find Michael?" "I don't know, but I left him the address of a friend in Pittsburgh who knows we're coming. If he does decide to be brave, he'll know how to reach us, and if he doesn't—" Catherine squeezed Mary's hand. "Then at least one person in the Ashford family will have chosen love." They travelled through the day and into the night, watching the landscape change from the familiar streets of Boston to the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. They shared sandwiches Mary had packed, dozed against each other's shoulders, whispered plans for their new life. Pittsburgh welcomed them with coal smoke and steel mills, a city of industry far from Boston's genteel streets. They found lodging in a boarding house run by a widow who asked few questions and charged fair rent. Catherine, who'd never worked a day in her life, found employment as a teacher in a small school for working-class children. Mary took in sewing and laundry. It was hard work, harder than Catherine had ever imagined, but it was honest and it was theirs. They lived simply, sharing a small room, pooling their earnings, learning to navigate a world where no one knew their background or cared about their families' names. The other boarders were immigrants and laborers, people who judged them by their actions rather than their pedigrees. Some raised eyebrows at two women living together with no male relatives, but most were too busy with their own struggles to concern themselves with others' business. 3 months into their new life, as winter settled over Pittsburgh and Catherine was learning to appreciate hot soup after a cold day in an unheated classroom, a letter arrived. Catherine recognized her father's handwriting immediately. She and Mary read it together by lamplight in their small room. "Dear Catherine, your mother refuses to speak your name. She's told everyone you've taken a position as a governess in Europe and won't be returning. James, however, knows the truth. He came to me last week and said he admired your courage. He said watching you choose your own path made him question his own choices. I don't know what will come of that. As for me, I'm recovering slowly. The doctor says I'll never be quite as I was before, but perhaps that's not such a bad thing. Being forced to slow down has given me time to think, to remember, to reconsider the choices I've made. I found Michael, or rather, I hired someone to find him. He still has his bookshop in Pittsburgh on Smithfield Street. He never married. He asked about me, asked if I was happy. I couldn't lie to him, Catherine, not after all these years. I'm not brave enough yet to leave your mother to blow up my entire life. Perhaps I never will be. But I'm going to write to him. We're going to correspond, at least. It's not much, but it's more than I've allowed myself in 30 years. I've arranged for a small trust in your name, separate from the family accounts. Your mother can't touch it. It's not a fortune, but it will give you options, security, if you need it. I'm not asking you to come home. I know you found something real, something I was too cowardly to fight for, but I want you to know you have choices. Always. Be happy, Catherine. For both of us. Your father. Catherine folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. Mary wrapped her arms around her and they sat together in their small room, in their modest life, feeling richer than they'd ever felt in Boston's mansions. Smithfield Street, Mary said thoughtfully. That's not far from here. We could walk there tomorrow. We could, Catherine agreed. We could introduce ourselves, tell Michael that Theodore Ashford wants to write to him, wants to rebuild what he lost. We could help them find their way back to each other. Playing matchmaker for your father, that's a strange turn of events. Catherine laughed, wiping her eyes. Strange, but right. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness, Mary. Even people who spent decades convinced they didn't. Aye. The next morning, they walked through Pittsburgh's busy streets to Smithfield Street. The bookshop was small but well kept, its windows displaying everything from penny dreadfuls to leather-bound classics. A bell chimed as they entered, and a man in his 50s looked up from behind the counter. He had kind eyes and greying hair, and when Catherine introduced herself, giving only her first name and mentioning that she was newly arrived from Boston, something in his expression shifted. "Boston," he said thoughtfully. "I left there many years ago. Sometimes I wonder about the people I knew there, how their lives turned out. Sometimes people wonder about you too," Catherine said carefully. "Sometimes people regret the choices they made, the people they let go. Sometimes they wish they could find their way back." Michael studied her face, then Mary's, then back to Catherine. "You're his daughter, aren't you? You have his eyes." "I am." "How is he?" "He's been ill, but he's recovering, and he's thinking about things he hasn't let himself think about for a very long time." Catherine pulled out her father's letter. "He asked me to find you. He wants to write to you, if you'll let him." Michael took the letter with trembling hands. "I never thought. After so many years, I never imagined." "Neither did he," Catherine said gently. "But sometimes it's never too late to choose differently, to choose love over fear." Michael looked at Mary, then back at Catherine, understanding dawning. "You've chosen your own path, I think." "We both have," Mary said, taking Catherine's hand openly, defiantly. Michael smiled, the first real smile Catherine had seen since they entered. "Then you understand what it costs, what it's worth." "We do," Catherine confirmed, "and we're telling you, telling everyone who needs to hear it, that the cost is worth it, that living honestly is worth it, that love, real love, is worth every sacrifice, every hardship, every judgment." They stayed for an hour, drinking tea Michael made in the back room, talking about Pittsburgh and Boston and the lives they'd built and the futures they hoped for. When they finally left, Michael had Theodore's address and a promise to write, and Catherine and Mary had made a friend, someone who understood the courage it took to choose love in a world that demanded conformity. Walking home through the afternoon sunshine, Mary said, "You know, we might actually pull this off. A life together, I mean. A real one." "We will pull it off," Catherine corrected. "Not might. Will. Because we're not alone, Mary. My father's finding his courage, and James is questioning his choices, and Michael's willing to risk his heart again after 30 years. We're part of something bigger than just us. A quiet revolution of people choosing love over fear." "That's very poetic." "I'm feeling poetic. I'm happy, Mary. Genuinely, completely happy for the first time in my life." Mary stopped walking, pulling Catherine into a quiet alcove between buildings. "I love you," she said simply. "I know we can't say it publicly. I know we have to be careful, but I need you to know." "I love you too," Catherine replied. "And someday, Mary, someday the world will catch up to us. Someday people will understand that love is love, regardless of who it's between. Until then, we'll be brave, we'll live honestly, and we'll help others find their courage too." They kissed, brief but tender, hidden from the world but not from themselves. Then they walked home to their small room in the boarding house, to their hard-won life, to their future that was finally, beautifully theirs. That evening, Catherine started a journal, wanting to record their story for some future generation that might understand better than her own. She wrote about her father and Michael, about the choices made and unmade, about the cost of honesty and the greater cost of lies. She wrote about finding love in unexpected places, about choosing yourself even when the world demands you choose something else. And she ended that first entry with a promise: we will build a life together, we will face whatever comes with courage and honesty, and we will prove that love, real, honest, brave love, is always worth fighting for, no matter what form it takes or who tells us it's wrong. This is our story, and it's only just beginning. Years later, when Pittsburgh had become home and their life together had settled into comfortable routine, when Theodore and Michael were exchanging weekly letters and tentatively planning a reunion, when James had finally found his own courage to leave his hollow marriage, Catherine would look back on that September day in 1914, when everything changed. She would remember standing in her father's study with those old letters, making the choice to be brave, to be honest, to choose love over safety. And she would smile, holding Mary's hand in their small but happy home, knowing that every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of fear had been worth it for this, a life that was real, love that was honest, and the freedom to be exactly who they were meant to be. The world would change slowly, too slowly for many who needed it. But for Catherine and Mary, for Theodore and Michael, for everyone who found the courage to choose love over fear, the world had already changed. And that quiet revolution, one brave heart at a time, would eventually transform everything.